Meanwhile, our next guest, she's the lady engineer, and it's trademarked.
Yeah, Lindsay Tabas is here. She helps founders design and sell the right products so they don't have to spend a bunch of cash making the wrong stuff. Hey, Lindsay.
Hey guys, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Look, how do you know you're making the right stuff?
Yeah, so entrepreneurs really have a bias towards solutions, and we get really excited about our own ideas because what we create is amazing, and
we're drunk on our own ideas. It's like, ooh, this tastes so good, right? I love it, right?
So one of the first things to know is that we have a bias towards solutions, and that's what got us to the place where 90% of startups fail, 90% of US aid projects fail, over 55% of IT projects fail. So first, we should understand that, maybe we shouldn't run towards the solution, right? So oftentimes we experience a problem, we feel anxiety, we find a solution, we get excited, the anxiety goes away, we're feeling all the creative juices. But if we go with the first solution, it's probably not that unique or innovative, right? So that's how we have this event, travel, and food apps that all kind of address the problem in the same way. I like to tell people the Albert Einstein quote where he says, given a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes on the problem and 5 minutes on the solution. And that's how we really get to innovation.
Wow. So, are there any industries that for you are a no-go, getting into really specifics? So you mentioned food, travel, and I forgot the third one. Do you stay away from those?
Food, travel, and event. So I started designing software in 2002, and I went to Silicon Valley in 2005 with a startup twinkle in my eye. And what drives me always has been designing technology for people. So I'm looking for, and I work with entrepreneurs and founders that are people-centered and solving a problem first, rather than just kind of doing something because the technology is cool.
Interesting.
Okay.
I feel like that's a common pitfall, right? Ooh, it's shiny and new. And a lot of times solutions, as you say, aren't timely. Like how many Uber Eats were there before Uber Eats became a thing, or, et cetera, et cetera. Like MySpace was a thing, and then Facebook came around and, dethroned it.
Lindsay, I think that's part of what makes all this so difficult. I don't think anybody creating a product is going to openly say, oh, I'm doing it to be not people-centric. Of course you're going to say I'm being people-centric, but people-centric is hard to define, right? Because there are a lot of things that were built, but they didn't, quote-unquote, make it because they were ahead of their times. Right? Yeah. Their potential users or who they want to get just don't know the value of it right now. And then 10 years later, something else happens. You're like, oh, I didn't catch this.
That was my idea.
That was my idea.
Yeah.
And that's happened to me too. The number one reason startups fail, and CB Insights puts out a report every year on the top 20 reasons startups fail. The number one reason startups fail is they launch to no market need. That means there's no customers that want your product, right? So
no customers. That's so sad.
Well, and it's not even just sad. It's like if you're a non-technical founder and you spent $5,000 or $150,000 on software development and no one wants your product, that's painful. That's demoralizing. That is life-shattering for some people.
Then Lindsay, in that case, how do you balance what CB Insight says, which is a publication I read regularly, they're great, and versus what Steve Jobs, people like Steve Jobs say, build something great and then they will want it.
Build it and they will come. How literary. Yes.
That is I have a presentation on product market fit, and the number 3 myth I debunk is, if you build it, they will come. Marketing is really hard. Building an audience, getting people engaged is really hard. I want to say something about Steve Jobs because I've worked with the type of founders that come to me and say, I don't want to listen to my customers and I don't find that this research is helpful because Steve Jobs didn't do it. I'm like, the myth of Steve Jobs was not Steve Jobs, okay? iPhone, iPod, it was based off of like 15, 20 years of public and private research. He didn't just put his finger in the air and say, oh, let's put a dial on an MP3 player or let's make a touchscreen. So it's a myth that Steve Jobs created this way, and we need to like stop thinking that that's the level of innovation to aspire to. Innovation is one incremental step of improvement and efficiency beyond what your early customers can do for themselves.
Yeah, you're describing Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos because she was like that, right? Innovation at all costs. Wear the black turtleneck because that's what Steve Jobs did, and never mind the consequences. Progress at all costs. It's very damaging.
Yeah, and you know, like the industry I grew up in, I was raised by men who started their career in Bell Labs and IBM research, you know, but I'm also an elder millennial. So like that industry though, it's very there's not a lot of diversity there. Yeah. Right? And now we're at a time where you no longer have to be technical to understand how technology solves a problem, right? So we have to think about who's giving out this advice. If we're getting advice from people that are technologists and software developers, we're really not going to be able to create a company and be innovative the same way like they can. And that doesn't mean we're at a disadvantage. It just means we have to do things differently.
Yeah. That's why product managers are important. Lindsay, tell me a little bit more about the environment you grew up in.
Bell Labs, that's a big deal for us oldies. We know what that is.
I think you and I are around the same age. So, I said I got to San Francisco in 2005. Google's Mountain View office had just opened. Ooh. I got to go for an opening party, and I thought I was on top of the world. But I want to tell you one specific story because I watched your show last week and we talked about Facebook and where they are today. Yeah. In 2006, I went to a panel where Mark Zuckerberg and Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn were talking. 2006 is a long time ago, right? We were the whole world did not know about Facebook. And I raised my hand and I asked Mark Zuckerberg, I said, you guys are fundamentally changing the way we connect and communicate with the people in our network. It was obvious then that, we don't share the same information with the same group of people. And I was like, when are you going to hire social science researchers? When are you going to bring people in to really address this? And he just skipped right over my question. And that is the DNA of their company. When I lived in San Francisco, they didn't hire anyone that was not a software developer. They didn't hire any researchers until 2010, right? So the first 5 years of my career, people didn't think someone like me that sat between the customer and the engineers had value at the early stages of a company. And we can see how that attitude and that reluctance to bring on people with those softer skills still affects the DNA of the company, of Facebook. It's the same at a lot of large companies, same with Google. The software developers, they run the show, even if there are user interface designers and user experience researchers. So things are changing. We need entrepreneurs that start with a problem to solve and not with a cool technology that they just want to experiment with.
Yeah, Lindsay, which year were you a, pardon the term, a real engineer? Like you were coding, you were, developing software as opposed to, it's the more people-facing or user-facing aspect of engineering.
Yeah. So I took my first ergonomics class while I was studying systems and information engineering at University of Virginia. And then I went to UC Berkeley to do 2 more years of technology education. So I had to take all my software development classes, like those 6 years. I was always hacking on the weekends, doing the startup blueprint, looking for tech co-founders through 2010. I'd say my entire career, I've used my technical skills, particularly my understanding of like database management, object-oriented programming, to collaborate effectively with software developers. But I've never been like a software developer has been the reason I was getting paid, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, Miss Lady Engineer, Julia, we kept you on for double your time, so you got a lot of chance to talk. But we love having you. Please keep in touch, and thank you for all your insight.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks,
Thank
guys.
you for
Have a
calling
great day.
in, Lindsay.
Bye.
So that's fascinating.
yeah.
The social networks didn't hire anyone with soft skills
2006.
to 2010.
That sounds very much on point.
Yeah, but all these problems that we have online now that we're finding out that social networks divide us, they don't unify us, and there's all sorts of consequences in politics, the way we interact with each other, et cetera, et cetera. So we experimented with the world using only people like you, Julia.
I wouldn't say only people like me. Yeah, back then, maybe.
Julia's an engineer, but she also has lots of soft skills, as
well,
you're seeing.